Mrs. Sherman?
I'd like to talk about the green space. I thought that part of the report was amazingly well done, and that we need to do something. We're gonna have kids in that building, and I'd like them to have a little place to throw a ball around. Not more playground space, but space.
On space, correct?
Certainly.
Good. Mr. Doobie, maybe you could help me with this. My understanding there was, and Mr. Hughes, no, both of you, because you have the plans, right? So there was 3 different fields.
Correct.
Potentially. 3 different places. I've had some people from Sandown express concern over not having it on top of where the septic system is. That was not something I think that,
Correct. That was not an ideal location.
but it was the largest field that we could put, correct, Mr. Hughes?
We can still put a field up there and be 100 feet away from a septic system.
Okay, so there are plans, but that was the place where the largest of the 3 fields, when I looked at them with you, correct?
Correct.
And then there was 2 other options, right? And for the point of clarification, they're not playgrounds. These are fields for kids to play on, completely separate, different issue. Initially, we started talking about expanding a playground area. Now we're talking about playing fields, something different, correct?
Correct.
We all agree on that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So that was it. There was 3 different places, and one, I just wanted to let you know that I had heard from some people from Sandown that were concerned about it being on top of the septic system. Mr. Hughes is telling us we're 100 feet away from it.
And the concern with the committee wasn't the septic, it was having separate playing areas. We would have a playground in the back of the school, we would have a playing field in the front of the school, you'd be separating groups of children, and then there was the concern of crossing the road.
Right. I think if I remember correctly, when I talked, it was being able to see them and
Correct.
see kids in,
Eyesight, yeah, eye line.
keeping kids in line of sight from
Yeah.
from one location or several
Exactly.
locations, the same.
So what is currently being suggested, are you comfortable with that, Mr. Doobie? The location, do we have a particular plan on the table that we're discussing?
Not to my knowledge, there was no particular plan brought before the committee.
Okay?
It was just our recommendation to designate a playing field of at least 1 acre in size.
All right, so Mr. Hughes, do you need more time to look into this, or can you tell this board how much space we have and approximately what it might cost? And where it would be located?
On top of the hill, we could probably have 300 by 150, all right, and be away from, I don't have my plans in
No,
front of me.
that's okay. How does that in comparison, I'm sorry, no idea how that relates to an acre, 300 by 150?
Just over an acre.
Just over an acre?
Just over an acre.
Okay.
Very
All
quickly
right.
do the math in my head.
That's all right.
But it may be smaller, just depending on what the topography is up there. But it's also the easiest space to develop. It's fairly somewhat level now, so it's minimal work as far as getting it to where it's usable. We'd also be developing access to it, ADA compliant access up to it to make it easier. And I'm looking at this more for phys ed in community use than I am for 20 minutes of playground time at recess. I don't know if that's,
No, that's not their recommendation.
Not the
It's the kids that are there. 1 through 5, is that what we're gonna put there? 1 through 5, that those 4th and 5th graders who were surveyed and asked questions want a place they can run around like crazy and throw a ball or kick a ball. Not a swing, not a slide, not a phys ed place necessarily, but a place that's open and they can just run. That's what they want to do. That's what a 4th and 5th grader wants to do.
Kickball and tag.
Yeah, they just want to, they want to run after each other.
75% of the kids in the survey over at Central clearly said, at recess, we're in the fields, we're running, we're playing kickball, we're playing football, we're running playing tag. So it's beyond the phys ed class.
Correct. Mr. Hughes, what would this cost approximately?
I'm not ready to quote pricing right now.
So,
Oh, so we need to do
Question.
that.
Yes?
Jim, do you see this as being some grading in seating, or do you see it just as seating?
Grading and
Grading and seating?
in that particular
In that
area.
particular.
The other areas that our contractor looked at would require some clearing of land
Mhm.
and fill brought in. And, probably an environmental study.
So if we have no idea how many zeros are involved, would we be able to get a ballpark for next meeting? Because I don't know if we can move forward with a vote if we have no idea, because I don't have
My
any,
hope is that you would authorize Mr. Hughes to explore
to explore it, I see.
This is
Okay.
preliminary
why I
Portion
numbers
of that.
and give you Plan A, Plan B, Plan C.
So this is where my hand.
Based on what the committee had asked for, these are your options. These are the costs associated with each option. Which one are you comfortable with?
So, Mr. Sapia?
Ready, Mrs. Dennehy?
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'd like to make a motion to direct Mr. Hughes to to get estimates on all three proposed green spaces at Sandown North, and report back to the board as to the cost of each one of the three.
Second. Seconded by Mrs. Sherman. Mr. Buelow?
I'm not sure why we need a motion
I'm
to
not
do
either.
that. The superintendent can ask Mr. Hughes to do
I know.
that at his discretion. But I'm willing to vote for it. I'm good with it.
I'm with you, I know.
I think,
He's asking
I
for
think
us.
because the attention and scrutiny and everything that, I think it's important that they understand that, you know, very transparent, we're having these discussions in public and we're directing people in public,
Okay.
and there's no
All right.
trick here, this is what he's doing.
I'd also like to point out that it's part of this process. And as I look at this, we may have to make decisions, A versus B, as it relates to this consolidation plan. That's why.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
And to echo that, I mean, they recommended a minimum of 1 acre, and then installing appropriate fencing as well, right? So that should be considered. And I agree with Mrs. Sherman, I think it needs to be a situation where the kids can go out to the playground and be able to run around. I think that was the intent of the recommendation. And that's what I would like to see. And my concern is that if we're going to do this out of this year's budget, we're running close to the end of the time that we have to authorize this. So,
Next meeting.
so do we think we can have an estimate in for next meeting to be able to authorize the funds for this?
18th of the month, is that correct? Light a fire under a few
And,
people.
and I believe we know what the capital surplus is right now. Right? And am I correct in saying it's about $200,000?
About
$190,000. The alternative is we can just approve up to a certain amount of money that we feel it'll fall in under.
But,
That would-
tonight?
Tonight, or?
But we don't know what that number is.
Right, so,
I mean, it's not, might not be doable at all.
I would think one of the three fields is not that cumbersome, but the other two, we don't know. So, once again, it's in conjunction with these other options, so I'm sorry.
That's okay. We don't know.
We have to wait.
We just don't know the figure.
Right.
Mrs. Green?
A few meetings ago, that number in our capital budget was $600,000. How did it dwindle
we
down
stay,
to
it's
190?
Excuse
So-
me, it's getting late, I'm exhausted.
Sure.
My day starts at 5 in the morning, and I've been on the road all day. I'd like us,
I still have the
many
floor.
meetings ago.
I still have the floor, excuse me. Thank you.
Mrs.
When
Green, you don't
Mr.
need to
Hughes
speak to
comes
people that
back,
way in this meeting.
when Mr.
Mrs.
Hughes
Green.
comes back,
Take a breath. You don't need to speak with people with such disrespect in this boardroom.
it was not disrespectful. I was merely asserting my ability to speak.
Why don't you stay on topic?
Thank you.
Why don't you stay on topic and we'll all get along?
When Mr. Hughes comes back, I would like to see a minimum of 3 bids for this work.
Can't do that fast. I can get you estimates of what
Mrs.
it's gonna cost.
Mrs. Green,
can't
he does
direct
not
someone
report to
to that.
you.
Are we
Mr. Hughes
taking,
does
are
not
we,
report
look,
to you.
we
You
are
don't give
taking a
him
vote.
You don't give him his marching orders, Mrs. Green. You need to be respectful. You need to remember the chain of command. You're part of a board. You are
Yeah,
part of a board. You are not the superintendent.
you are not my lecturer. Thank you very much. I would like to see, I
do
would
wanna
like,
make this
look,
meeting, Mrs. Green.
I am still having the floor. We have been whiplashed with wild estimates. The transformers, the playground equipment, it went from 90,000 to
Point of order.
65,000.
This is not-
I
Mrs.
do
Green,
not
you
want
have
to
the
be
floor at
whiplashed
the courtesy
again.
of the chair. You have the floor at the courtesy of the chair. You are going off topic again. Mr. Hughes, what time did you start this morning?
5.
Thank you. I know you're exhausted. I'm trying to keep this on topic. I do not want this to be contentious. I want to have a good, honest conversation.
When I come to you with a budget number.
Yep,
The actual number, we don't get until it goes out to bid.
of course.
Thank you.
All right, and a perfect example of that is the transformer project. We had an estimate, could cost you $500,000. I put that in as a budget number. It goes out to bid, and then it gets knocked down. Now we're about 325. That's how that works, so look, I don't know.
That's the
I-
process.
There's no way that I can have 3 separate bids by the 18th of the month. I can at least have an estimate, a rough idea what it's gonna cost before it goes out to bid.
Yeah, that's what we need. We need that information.
All right, is it gonna cost X? I don't know.
We have a motion on the floor. Mrs. Danahy, would you read the motion?
Mr. Sapia, motion to direct, to obtain estimates on 3 proposed green spaces at Sandown North and report back to the board on all 3 options.
All in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, thank you.
Opposed? 7 in favor, 1 opposed. So the motion carries.
Stacy?
So when, I'd like to come back to this, so that when we get that information, hopefully June 18th, we've still got other things to consider. The sight line, the street, all those things. That's all gonna be part of it. So everybody's gonna do their homework here and be ready to say, I won't have enough staff to watch that area and this area at recess. Or, you know, the streets, too busy, or we need that information, because it's really hard to make a decision just based on the number of money it's gonna cost to make a play space.
Thank you. So, Dr. Metzler, what is, how reasonable is it that we might have that kind of information 14 days from now to help us make that decision?
Well, I think, you know, with Ms. Georgian, I mean,
Okay.
we can take a look. I mean, at the end of the day, there are 3 options, right? One may be a really great option, and people would love it, but we can't afford it.
All right.
You know, so it's, again, it's the risk thing, you know, you take, you know, and that road, it's not a busy road, you know, so,
Okay.
you know what I mean? So those are the kinds of concessions you might have to make. All right, well, we have to settle for this because we couldn't afford that, right? Or vice versa. Or you could say, no, this is non-negotiable. This is exactly what we need, this is where it needs to go, and this is, you know, and then we'll go from there. But I would hope the transition team, through you, Mrs. Georgian, will be able to tell us, you know, what's the value that we don't see in the number? I guess to Mr. Chairman, what's the value that we don't see in a number?
Right.
So, just to be clear, are we looking at the pros and cons of each of the 3 locations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
And I'd like you to, if you could do that with the transition team, that would be great.
Okay.
Mr. Sapia?
The way I envision this is Jim will go out and get the estimates for the three spots. We may want to do 1, we may want to do 2, we may want to do 3, based on recommendations and capabilities and the financial aspect of it. So it's a collaborative effort moving up to the last day.
Why don't you take the floor again, Mr. Hughes?
Ago, I sat here, we talked about extending the playground. And that called for creating a place to put the playground, which created an area 60 feet by 125 feet adjacent to the existing playground. That is something we can still develop, and that gives us a green space for the kids to run around. But I still feel that Sandown North is the only school that does not have an area that kids can go out for phys ed, and that's what we should be looking at, is developing phys ed space. Field, you know, I don't know where it's gonna be. It could be as you're driving down the driveway before you reach the school on the right, could be around the back of the school, and these are things that I'll get some numbers and put it to, you know.
And before we get too, like, before we draw the lines too clear, like, just, if we create space, right, it's going to be used
Right,
by both.
right.
The phys ed teacher's gonna use the
course.
space, I'm telling you.
Oh, yeah.
They're gonna go outside, and they're gonna use whatever space they have.
They do
Right?
now.
So, I don't wanna call out a specific space that's only designed for one thing. It's gonna have more than one purpose, for sure. For
Right.
sure. It just needs to be big enough. That's, I mean, that's really all I think you're asking. And then, I think through the transition team, there's other considerations that we're not gonna see in the numbers, right? So I think we're in a good place with this, if we can get some estimates, and then, because we'd want to get that out to bid relatively quickly after the 18th. If that's something you say, go ahead, we can get it out to bid, within the next couple days after that, right?
Yes.
All right. Do we want to discuss sprinklers?
Sure.
Because, we've received some information that it could be cost prohibitive.
All right, can I do it, can I just, I want
Why
to
don't
save you,
you do
Mr.
that?
Hughes. You just help me when I start to get this wrong, all right? So the sprinklers have more, it's kind of more than one story. It's the kind of the tale of two cities in a lot of ways, right? Tale of two towns, because we have the $250,000 that we have for the Danville sprinkler. So I'll start with that, even though we're talking about the Sandown consolidation, because it is important to, it's a similar project, if you will, and this has been budgeted for. So, we had plans, we thought there was a certain amount of money, right? So this works the opposite way than the transformers, right? So we budget a certain amount of money, and the plans come in. And so I meet with the what are they, the architects, the planners, whatever they are, and so they come in and they say, we had to make some changes to the plans. I only cared about three things. I made this very, very simple for myself. Tell me it's not an eyesore, tell me it costs less, and tell me it's more efficient. Open the envelope, please. That's all it was, right? That's what I told them. They wanted to talk about so the original plans were a lot more than the 250. They were up, and I tried to press them for a number, and it was about $800,000, right? And this was going to be less expensive. So I heard less expensive. I was thinking, wow, it's not even going to be 250. It might only be 150. And so that sprinkler system came in at $655,000 for Danville. To which I asked the most logical question next, Mr. Hughes, please get me a number for Sandown. We're going to be discussing that, right? Which he did, and I sent that to you. And you saw that number is 521, right? There's a sprinkler system. It's just a sprinkler system. There's no pump. There's no, that was the additional costs. And so the sprinkler system was about 260, but when we added up all the numbers, that came out to be about 521, correct?
Yes.
So we're looking at a number.
water.
What?
With water.
With water and pressure.
Oh, they gotta put water in it.
To, at least one person said, to my understanding, a sprinkler system wouldn't be any good without water and pressure, right? So we kind of needed those things. So, not to be sarcastic about it, but I mean, it's twice what we thought it was gonna cost. So whiplash the other way, we sometimes, and I, it's hard, Mr. Hughes, we're hitting them, asking them for all these numbers, for all these different things, and he was as surprised, we were all surprised, and not pleasantly surprised. So that's the number for the sprinkler system, is 521, as we speak. So I don't know if you needed more than that. That's how simple I made it, really,
Is Mrs. Green?
So how did we ever get the number of 250?
To put sprinklers in that building, it would cost us $250,000. To make it functional, we need a pumping system, a tank cistern to hold all the water, a way to pump it, a building to contain it, and that brings the cost up to $655,000.
So
And
where
we're
did the
also putting
200
sprinklers in an existing building, which is very difficult.
Okay, it doesn't quite answer my question, though. When this original idea was floated that the sprinklers needed to be installed in Sandown Central and in Danville, and there was a motion at deliberative to fund, $250,000 to put them in, where did that $250,000 number come from? Where? Who's taking responsibility for that number? I'd like to know.
All right, Perry Mason, that's enough.
No, it is a serious issue because we have a big public concern now that we cannot satisfy because of an expense. And it is a huge problem. And I would like to understand where that $250,000 number came from in the first place that so misled us and the public.
So that number came up as a motion made by a board member at deliberative session.
For
The number was wrong for Danville, thank you. It was a mistake, and it's as simple as that, and everyone sitting at this table understands that. But for some reason, Mrs. Green, you need to pound away at that, which once again, I find to be, we understand we have a problem. Bids, to Dr. Metzler's point, sometimes you come up with a budget number, and the bids come in, and I'll use the old Lawrence High School restoration project. They came in millions of dollars over budget. Those things happen when you follow this process. And the process is very standard. You go out, you get an estimate, and then you, later on, once it gets approved, you put it out to bid. And sometimes the bids come in where you want them to, and sometimes they come in way over where you want them to.
Well, thank you. I wasn't aware of that ever. I never
Super.
read a newspaper article to that effect.
Super.
Now, the thing is, how many estimates did we get on this project? So we have, more than $500,000. We have $655,000 on a school building. How many estimates does that number reflect?
Well, there's a difference between an estimate and a bid, as you know, right? So the bid is like, and I don't even know if we got one bid, right? So I don't even know, I don't know what that number means. And, you get some people come in and say, you can't put the tank there, you have to put it over there. And then somebody else comes and goes, it can't go there, it has to go underground. I'm like,
Okay.
I don't know,
but
I'm not an expert, and
How many estimates, how many bids?
we got one bid.
Two companies come out and look at it, and one company decided they didn't want to bid on it.
One bid.
More bids?
What's that?
You're gonna get more estimates of it?
I'm not required to, I'm required to post it, and it's not fair to people that bid on
Yeah,
projects.
that's the process.
That's the process, I follow the process.
Mr. Collins has been wanting to speak. May I let him jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I think at that amount of money, it is prohibitive at this time, and I think maybe we should talk about either budgeting for it starting in the fall, or putting it on as a warrant article.
Yeah.
So,
Or
Yeah.
half and half, or
And-
something,
and-
capital reserve.
I understand the concern, and there's a safety element to that, but I think that we have been in this district for 50 years, and I don't think we've had a fire in a school yet, knock on wood. Hopefully that continues, and hopefully, we're in good shape, but I do think it needs to be addressed. I just don't think it's, at this time.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'd love to see it as a warrant article
So,
for both schools.
I've heard from, a lot of people in the public, because I know in the past we've tried not to put safety issues on the article, in an article on the warrant. And I've been assured that we need to trust the public that if we were to do it, that they would support it.
Yeah, and I thought it was explained to us that it's not a safety issue, that we would get the children out, but it would be about saving the building.
Yeah, I mean, anything that could be connected, I'm with you, it's not a safety issue, but it's a
Okay.
sthink it's in the safety, it's kind of in the
All right.
safety world, wouldn't you say, It's saving the building, and certainly the firefighters, but I think it's also important, the Sandown reps, we tried to budget for this, both Sandown reps voted against this. Arthur Green, when he was on the budget committee, and Kathy Gorman both voted against this. They represent Sandown. And that was the vote, and if they had voted the other way, it would have been budgeted for.
$250,000 would have been budgeted for, and we'd still be in the same position. If I could, the fire chief recommended that perhaps we could look at a cistern, installing a cistern in the area so that there would be a secondary water source for the pumpers. And this would alleviate the need, perhaps, for the sprinklers. So because actually, he gave me the original, this is actually of interest to you, Mr. Hughes, because I have the architect's memos where it says that there would be a cistern installed on the property for a secondary water source, and that never happened. It also, interestingly, on this document, said that a steel stud wall was replaced in the designs by a masonry unit, which is interesting because that didn't happen either. So those two things in that architect's memo, which I should give you, which predate you, of course, never happened. So instead of thinking that we need to necessarily budget for sprinklers, we might just be looking at installing a cistern on the property.
Why don't you pass the memos that you have to Mr. Hughes, and he can evaluate them. But if this is new information, this might not be the time to evaluate that. I'm sure he would love to see that data, and we can take it from there. Mr. Ward?
I understand what Mrs. Green is saying. I think a point of clarification would be what she refers to as a cistern would be the equivalent of a fire pond, whether it's contained or it's an open pond, that when fire trucks show up, they draft from that in order to not have to keep driving somewhere else to get water.
Mm-hmm.
I believe to put in a cistern in the definition of the word, in a tank in the ground and stuff, would be extremely expensive. That's the other half of the $500,000 bid, would be the tank in the ground, the excavation, the putting that. If we could develop a fire pond, maybe, but it still leaves the fact that the fire trucks have to get there from somewhere else to get there, to push the water.
Right.
The fire sprinklers are an instant on, which is what saves the building. So it's apples and oranges.
Right.
It's really not the same thing.
I see what you're saying. Dr. Metzler?
This is the question, so the $250,000, right, that you asked for, it didn't have to go to the Danville sprinklers, correct?
By law?
'Cause I remember my first year when money was added.
No,
and they
it
said
didn't have to.
It doesn't have to. It should, in the spirit in which it was added.
Correct.
So that 250 added to the 250 that Arthur Green and Kathy Gorman voted against would have been 500. We would have been very close, and I would have.
What would have been doesn't really matter. I think we should
Oh.
move forward. Your point is well taken. Your point is well taken. We budgeted 45 minutes for this discussion, and we're 35 minutes in, and I would really like this conversation to be productive. I'd like to stay on task. It doesn't sound feasible to do that, to do this, this budget year. If we all agree that maybe next year or a warrant article, then I think we should come to some consensus and move on to another topic. Mrs. Sherman?
I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Doobie, if I
Certainly.
could. But once again, I love this report, Mr. Doobie.
Thank you.
And I feel that last time when we only acted on one part, there were some very, very, very disappointed people that I'm not sure why they thought we were going to be able to do it all in one night, in one fell swoop with my magic wand that I have.
Because you're all amazing.
And the 650,000 I have at home. So I want you to know that there are gotta be things on this list the committee has to understand. We're not gonna be able to do it all at once. I want the public to know that too, not on Facebook, but here in transparency time, that there's really some things we're not gonna be able to do in 10 minutes.
Absolutely.
I wanna get the kids there, and I wanna get green space. And of course I wanna keep them safe. Who in their right mind doesn't? But there's gonna be some things we're just gonna have to say, well, I don't know, we're gonna put on a warrant and look for a capital reserve. Really, can you please express that to your committee? Mr. Ward, I know you guys worked really hard on this. This is a great list, whoa, but we can't do it all immediately. Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you, Mrs. Stanson, I feel better.
I'm glad. I know there's some other hands up, but they came down before I could jot down the names. Mr. Collins?
Yeah, so a couple of things. A quick question. My understanding, based on what Mr. Ward just said, is a sprinkler system hits the whole building immediately, all at the same time.
Well, it hits whatever point a fire would set off a head.
Right.
If there was a fire under that head, it would set off that head only.
Wherever it's needed.
Only that one.
Right.
Correct.
So, whereas a cistern would be a point of source of water
A pond.
for fire trucks to pump to use with a hose.
Correct.
So, all right, so,
Two different things.
right, two different things, and if the fire is big enough by the time the fire trucks get there, a cistern wouldn't necessarily be the same thing
It
or
would-
replace a sprinkler
It would
system.
certainly help. They wouldn't have to truck water
Right, right.
for certain.
So, the next thing I wanted to say is some of these things in the recommendations in the report, I mean, I don't see them so much as board action as much as I see them as the superintendent handling them. So, for instance, the impact on professional staff, the recommendations there.
Would you like to make a motion in good faith to
Yes.
support the superintendent in doing some of that?
In
That might be-
following through on the recommendations.
Yes,
that-
would you like to, go ahead.
So I'll make a motion that the superintendent, in good faith, follow through on the recommendations within this report
Regarding the professional staff? Impact on
regarding the
professional?
professional staff and regarding the bus transportation for students.
Okay, those two categories.
Yes.
All right, Mrs. Danahy, do you have that?
Second?
And a second from Mr. Bealow.
Mr. Collins made a motion to support the superintendent in good faith, following through on recommendations regarding transportation and staffing.
Impact on professional staff, why don't we say that? Bus transportation for students and impact on professional staff, because those are that's how those categories are spelled out in the recommendations.
When it's feasible.
Could you rephrase, could you tell
Sure.
me again on transportation, you said?
Bus transportation for students
And impact
and
on
impact on professional staff. This is taken directly out of the headings on page 7 of the summary. Yeah.
Okay, so let me, Mr. Collins, authorize the superintendent in good faith to follow through on recommendations regarding bus transportation for students and impact on professional staff.
Correct. Thank you. Do I have a second? Mr. Ward? Was that, no? Mr. Sapia?
You already had one, right?
Did
Already
I?
seconded
Doesn't
it.
matter.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
It's
That's
it's
fine.
late.
It's late.
It's getting late.
I'll
Yeah.
second it.
All right, so we have a second.
Mr. Beal seconded, right?
I'll defer to Mr.
Somebody second.
Mrs. Green?
So what does that actually mean? Does it just mean we're going to let the superintendent deal with these issues and we don't want to be concerned with them anymore? Is that what that means exactly?
Why don't you answer that? Excuse me. Yep. Did you want to explain what it means, Mr. Collins?
Well, for me, what it means
Yeah,
is that
for you.
I trust that the superintendent will take these recommendations to heart and work towards achieving these goals. And that, I think that's the good faith effort that we put in the motion.
Okay.
Obviously, I think if something in here doesn't make sense to do, they're gonna make that decision, but I don't think we can make a decision within 10 minutes about everything that's listed here. But at the same time, I want them addressed, I don't want them ignored.
Sure. So if recommendations and decisions are made, would you not bring them to the board? Keep us apprised of what,
Well,
yeah.
I offered Mrs. Green to be part of the transition team, she declined.
Okay.
Notice if Mr. Ward, that's the group that's doing the work.
Right.
If we're too busy to participate in that work, I mean, I can do the work and bring it to the board. It seemed logical to ask the Sandown reps to do to
So
help with
this
the
is
work
why
in
we have
Sandown.
teams. We have teams in place.
Correct.
Okay.
So,
Mrs. Sherman,
uh,
Mrs. Sherman,
So I have faith that the professional staff and the TTA will work together with our superintendent to address these concerns and recommendations that are impacting to staff.
Yeah.
We tried to do some of that last time we met, so people would know where they were headed, et cetera, et cetera. There's probably more people that still need to know where they're headed, but I know that's all I have faith that that's gonna happen. And that's what I think the intent of this motion is. The same thing with bus transportation. That I'm not an expert on bus transportation. He's gonna come back with, this is what I've decided to do, or with the transition team, they'll have made a decision.
yeah, can I just speak to, my plan would really be, when the consolidation committee, come, is to have the transition team come, whether they're gonna be ready on the 18th of June, or whether you're gonna hear from them the third week of August. That remains to be, and I've been working closely with Principal Jordan and Mrs. Stafford. So, if you want to hear from the transition team, they could let you know. But they're ironing out, and there's more. There's a lot more to the transition than is in the actual report that you gave us.
correct.
As you know, I mean, we had a quick little one page. There's a lot more to it, and I know the parents had a lot more. And the consolidation committee had a specific purpose that they were trying to get done. Got that done. Now the transition team has a specific purpose, Mr. Rolfe and company, to get the rest of that done. So that's where that is. So that's all in process. Mr. Stoke and I met today with Lorna Walker, and we're looking at support staff, we're looking at clerical staff, we're looking at all the other issues that we have to deal with in order to get this done, as fairly and as quickly. And Mr. Hughes is working on moving, so that he's got, you have Pollard, and you have Sandown Central, you have Sandown North, so that's all gotta be coordinated. They're working on that. So there's a lot going on right now. How much you want to hear on the 18th of June, and then what you don't hear on the 18th of June, you'll probably hear the third week of August. I mean, I can clear the agenda for the 18th of June and make it just about this. There's a lot. It could be the whole night. If that's what you want me to do, I'll just wipe out the agenda for the 18th and make it just about this.
I think we have some other things that we're committed to as well.
Well, some of those things could be moved off. But I don't want,
Some of the things off.
Yeah, make a big spot.
Mr. Sapia?
So to just about everyone's point here, and in keeping with Mr. Buellow's want to keep people here longer, what I might suggest is dedicating an evening as a workshop to this whole issue and kind of having our bullet points, because like you said, Mrs. Steenson, we have other topics we need to work on, but maybe we dedicate an evening and have all these things to be, and we just dedicate it to the consolidation one evening as a workshop. Just a thought.
Don't we have a
On your
motion?
thought?
There's a
on the
motion.
thought?
Yeah,
People's calendars right
Yeah.
now.
I
People's
can't get
calendars.
people to
No,
training,
I
you know?
know.
People don't have nights.
Can we call a question?
Yeah,
That's
I know.
exactly
That's
my
why I
next
didn't
step.
think
Thank you,
about it
Mrs.
originally.
Spiro.
That's why we have
All
a
right,
motion.
Mrs. Danahy, would you please read the motion?
Mr. Collins, motion to authorize the superintendent in good faith to follow through on recommendations regarding bus transportation for students and impact on professional staff. Mr. Ward, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Thank you.
Opposed? Okay. That carries 7-1. Very good. Mr. Collins?
Yes, so quickly, I just want to say that there are 2 other recommendations in here about facilities, evaluate infrastructure at Sandown North Central, and capital improvement committee reviews long-term plans for both schools. I can assure you that's going to be part of our capital improvement planning. So absolutely, that's going to be part of what we do moving forward.
In good faith.
In good faith.
Excellent.
And I also would like to say to Mr. Sapia's comment that I think the workshops here were actually, I think the consolidation committee did all of that work. They did a ton of work to bring these recommendations forward, so why reinvent the wheel?
I just brought that up in the hopes that instead of having reports, and I heard 3 or 4 times tonight, well, we just can't take 10 minutes, and so maybe dedicating to Dr. Mezzo's point, a specific.
Give me a time.
Period
How
of
much,
time.
how much time do you want on this?
An hour.
On the transition team? 60
Whoa,
minutes?
whoa, whoa. Before we do that, what are you looking to, no, I want to know what, before we give you an amount of time, what information you're going to, give me categories of what you're going to come back with next time, or you and I can sit down next week and
And-
discuss
Well,
that.
that's gonna come from the transition team.
If I could, I'd like to just leave it up to you and Dr.
Right.
Metzler to figure that out
Let's wait and see
before the
what
next
you,
meeting.
I think you're going to present
So
next
you'll,
week.
you'll
when we
know
plan-
exactly what's ready and what can be presented, and you figure out the timing and go from there. I'm fine with that.
Okay, So
That's
some
what
may
we
be
need.
next meeting, some may be in August.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, done.
Whatever is ready to, perfect.
Joanne, you comfortable with that?
As the work is happening, different priorities are sort of
Right.
Yep.
popping their head out.
We don't want to interrupt the work.
Exactly.
I didn't just bury you, did I? You good?
No, in 2 weeks, you guys are going to present what you're ready to present.
Yes,
And we're going to accommodate that.
okay.
Okay,
And then in late August, you're going to present what you're ready to present, and we'll accommodate that. Mr. Doobie,
Yes.
have we addressed enough tonight to make you feel comfortable and that you think your committee would be comfortable?
I think you have. The only question that's in my mind, and probably is going to be on the rest of the committee's mind, is the sprinklers. We talked about it a little bit. What's the board thinking? What direction are we going? Are we waiting till?
I'd like to see a warrant article. That's, I honestly, that's the way I would vote if we were to vote on that now. I don't know that anyone here is prepared to make a motion to spend that money now, but if you are, we've discussed it. You don't need to make a motion just for discussion, but if you really believe that should happen, please go ahead and say so. As for myself, I'd like to see a warrant article next year.
I would too.
So,
So I think we're good.
yeah. All right, well, thank you so much for coming this
Great.
evening.
Thank
And
you,
for all
Mr.
your
Doobie.
work.
You're welcome. The hard work is yet to be done. We did the easy work by comparison.
Well, if you think of something that you didn't just think of, you shoot me a text or an email so I can,
Certainly will.
all right, thanks, Lee.
Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Hughes, why don't you wrap it up for us?
I would like to ask for some money. The front,
Great.
Timing.
front of Sandown North. All right, we have an issue with the siding. I can't keep siding on that building. I need to stiffen up the front of the building in order to do that. And so I have a project that we're going to put 3/4 plywood on that, on the 2x6 metal studs that are 2 foot on center, and vinyl side that. The manufacturer of the vinyl siding has guaranteed me 200 mile an hour wind loads on that system. And we've had problems since the building was built, with it just blowing siding off that fascia on that gable end. So what I'm asking for is $8,000 to do that.
Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Ward, second. Mr. Collins. Mrs. Green?
It seems like a lot of money. How many bids did we get for this?
I'm sorry?
How many bids did we get for this?
No bids, this is just an estimate.
Your own estimate?
Yes, it's, well, I get it from Monahan Lumber for the lumber. The siding, I get it from the siding contractor.
So how much are you paying for the sheets of 3/4 inch plywood?
I'm paying $26.68 a piece. If you multiply that times 70 sheets, that comes out to $1,867.29. Then I'm gonna need some screws, all right, a few boxes of screws. That's about $81.50 for screws, which brings the total to $1,948.79 for the plywood and the screws to put up there. I'm gonna have to rent a lift to get people up there, and we're gonna do this in-house. So that's about $2,400 for a week. And the siding contractor told me that he can do it for $2,800.
You need a lift for a week?
Mrs. Green,
I'm gonna rent the lift for a week. I may not need it for a whole week. All right, and if I return it 4 days, I save a day. So it may only cost $2,100 instead of $2,400. But I'd like to plan on having it for a week, just in case I need it.
Excuse me.
That's how I estimate
Mr. Ward?
projects.
Okay,
Point of
so
order.
what
Point of order.
I don't
Mr.
understand.
Hughes, you don't have to explain how long you're gonna rent the lift or how many sheets of plywood you're gonna buy.
I can count, I
I'd
can
like
tell
to
you
call
how
the
many screws
question.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
need.
I'd like to
I
call
know
the
you
question. This
can,
is
but what I'd
ridiculous.
like to know, Mrs. Green, do you think, I have to ask the question, do you think you know more about this than Mr. Hughes?
I think I have to watch the taxpayer's dollar, and I don't know why this isn't already payable through the budget, why we have to allot more money from the surplus. Why isn't this in your budget? Because there's plenty.
All right.
You know, have you exhausted your budget, Mr. Hughes?
Probably not.
Point of order, point of order,
Stop explaining.
point of
This
order.
gentleman here would
That's
like to
not-
call the question.
That's not pertinent to this discussion.
It's absolutely
No,
pertinent.
it's not. And number
Yes,
two,
this is coming out of surplus. It is absolutely
I think I have
pertinent.
the floor now, Mrs. Green.
Mr. Ward asked
If
if
you were
he
so
could call the
concern-
question. Mr. Ward would like to call the question. Mrs. Danny, would you read the motion, please?
Mr. Ward motion to allow $8,000 for Sandown North to stabilize the front section of the Sandown North School and securing the siding.
All in favor?
7?
Yeah. Opposed? Abstaining?
Opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Abstaining.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Jim, I'd like to apologize.
Yeah, I would as
Go
well.
home, go to bed,
Thank you, Mr. Hughes.
start again tomorrow. Tomorrow's another
Jim.
day. Tomorrow's Friday.
By the way, I was up at 3.
And by
Doesn't
the
matter.
way, I don't appreciate other people apologizing on my behalf.
I was apologizing on behalf of the board,
I
which you happen to be part
am
of.
entitled to ask questions because I am responsible for the taxpayer dollar.
There's nothing you're responsible for.
Please, if you'd like to say something, ask to be acknowledged by the chair. That's all I ask. Ask to be acknowledged by the chair. We can't have chaos. We cannot have chaos. Let's be mature, responsible adults. Please. It's important to me that we be respectful to each other. It's important to me that we be respectful to the staff and employees that work for us. Virtually everyone who works for this district could make a lot more money working in the private sector. They choose to work in this district for the benefit of our children. I would ask that we all remember that, and please try to treat them with the courtesy that they deserve when they're in this boardroom. Enough said. I'd like to move on.